Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Top Left Corner podcast for episode 3. I'm Finn Lyons, of course, by myself once again, as I am getting ready to line up some special guests for the regular season. But for now, as we enter into the final few days of preseason, it is just me, as it has been the last 2 episodes. So we've had some crazy happenings in the NHL the past week. I'm, off the air for a whole week, and crazy things go down, and we're going to get into that and break that down today. So, obviously still being in the preseason, we've had some preseason drama related to injuries and sort of, the amount of games players are playing and just sort of the toll it's been taking on some different teams this season. I mean, when last week when I did my show, the preseason, of course, had just started, but there was no crazy injuries, no nothing like that yet. Just a few minor things here and there. But now it's spiked, and it's a cause for concern, honestly. The other night, Drew Doughty, not the biggest star as he was back in the day, but still a high-profile defenseman on the Kings roster. He's out month to month. I mean, losing a big defenseman like that just because he had to play in some meaningless game is not a good look for the Kings, and we'll sort of see as we go through the rest of these injuries here. 2 for the Montreal Canadiens. These 2 specifically sparked a lot of controversy that we'll get into a little later, but David Reinbacher and Laine both out multiple months. Reinbacher, promising rookie, drafted 2 years ago by the Canadiens, hoping to make the NHL lineup this year. He's out for 5 to 6 months, so he's basically done for this season. He might get in at the end of the season, hopefully, if he can heal properly and quickly. We all hope for that. And then the Patrik Laine incident, he's out luckily for only 2-3 months. The injury was suspected to be much worse, but it ended up being okay. And then you got to feel really bad for the man. Laine, struggling with a bunch of stuff, mental health issues, and just sort of bouncing around team to team, not really getting to set his game up how it should be, and get to the level we know he can play at, that 40-goal pace that he was in Winnipeg. And, going to Montreal was a whole new opportunity for him, an opportunity to sort of be more of a star on the team, set up with Suzuki and Caulfield like that. Just getting that chance to sort of reimagine his career and sort of get the foot down in the NHL as he was hoping for, and now that's going to be ruined because of a frankly dirty play by Cedric Pierre. We'll get to that later, but yeah, it's just a devastating blow for the Canadiens, who don't have many good players to begin with. So losing 2 promising players in a preseason game that was absolutely meaningless off a dirty play, I mean, it's tough to see, and it's something that's been sparking discussion around the NHL world. And another devastating injury is Macklin Celebrini, first overall pick for the Sharks, out for a day-to-day at least. Hopefully nothing too serious, and we'll be able to see him in some NHL action. But it's just, again, it's a shame to see this really highly touted prospect that now we have to worry about his health if we're going to even be able to see him for the Sharks, help their rebuild along and just get some exciting action out of the young star. And speaking of young stars, Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk also out day-to-day. Again, another just really dirty incident by the Canadiens this time. So after receiving their own dirty little hits there, they go back and return the favor, for lack of a better phrase, to the Ottawa Senators. And it's kind of gross just to sort of see this happen. Again, in meaningless games, and that's really the emphasis. You don't ever want to see this happen. You don't want to see anyone get injured ever. You don't want to see these dirty plays that are terrible and need to be reprimanded. But especially in a meaningless preseason game, there's no stakes in the line. At this point, teams have their rosters figured out, and these players are not going to be fighting for a spot. So doing this is absolutely terrible, and even less impactful than it would be in a regular season game. And then finally, Artemi Panarin is out day today again. why are all these high-profile players getting hurt in this preseason? And why are these dirty plays happening to these superstar players? They're receiving them from these awful NHLers who shouldn't even be in the NHL. Some of them aren't. Some of them are fighting in it for even AHL spots. So just sort of see this unnecessary physicality and wear and tear of these players is just something that is really tough to watch and tough to see. It's hard even in the regular season and now in the preseason. So, like I said, there's been a lot of discussion with the preseason and what to do about it. Recently, the NHL held their GM's meeting or Board of Governors meeting. I can't remember off the top of my head which one it is, but basically same difference. They brought up removing two preseason games. And a lot of people like this idea. Getting rid of two unnecessary games. You don't really. The preseason has become really more and more meaningless. We don't need to see the star players playing these games against AHL lineups. If you're a team at home, you're icing a lot of your NHL guys versus a team on the road who's facing these AHL guys. We don't need to see that. It's really not important. It is important, obviously, to see sort of your younger guys and how they can shine in sort of an NHL spotlight, with a lot more fans in the building, even in a preseason game than they're used to in juniors or in college. And it's just, but we don't need, I think there's 6 of them. We don't need that many. 4 is probably a really good number if they get rid of these 2 in the next CBA, which I think is up in 2026. So we'll see if something actually comes out and changes from this. But it'll be a good change, hopefully, to see 2 less preseason games. Oh, but wait, the caveat on top of that is that they will be adding those 2 games onto the regular season. So instead of an 82-game regular season, we'll be having an 84-game regular season. So it just defeats the purpose. Taking away these preseason games in an attempt to, sort of protect these players and their bodies and keeping them healthy, lessen the wear and tear on them, and just to add it into the regular season, which then makes these 2 extra games even more incentivized to play harder, to hit, to make these big plays, and then you have the opportunity for things to go wrong. And so I just think removing the 2 preseason games to then add it to the regular NHL players is terrible. It's a dumb idea, and you're just going to be facing the same things. We're going to be getting to game 84, and you're going to have a lot more injuries. Adding 2 games might not sound like a lot, but it really is. And that's a whole nother 2 hours of ice time. Well, obviously they're not playing the whole 60, but you get the point. That's another 2 hours of ice time that these teams are playing, and just more opportunities to get hurt. Again, in a more high pressure, more important scenario than a preseason game. And it's frankly just obviously it's a money grab. The fans don't, the fan reaction to this from the fans that I've seen is terrible. They think it's a stupid idea to add more games. We have enough content already. I mean, 82 games I feel like is the perfect number. And recently in sports, there's just a push to keep adding games for no reason. I mean, look at the NFL. 17 obviously isn't crazy, but I mean, everyone felt like 16 was a perfect number, and even maybe 14 or 15 in the NFL over there. But I feel like we've reached a point in the NHL where 82 is perfect. We have a good split. Seeing the opposite conference, depending on where you're in, getting to see your opponents in your own conference in the other division enough times, and then playing your division the certain amount of times. It's nice. It's nice to see. It's a nice flow of teams you get to play and teams you face, and you get to see everyone every year. And adding those 2 games makes these matchups, that still, in division, they happen a lot. But adding 2 more games, who knows what 2 teams you'll play? But getting these extra games makes these matchups less important and less special, especially in the standings. Makes these games at the beginning of the season less and less, meaningful, and having to just keep playing the same teams over and over again. Adding the 2 more teams. Say if you're Buffalo, you're playing Ottawa 6 times. Well, I guess it would be 5 times. You wouldn't add 2 of the same team. So you're playing Ottawa 5 times. You're playing Montreal 5 times. That's just kind of ridiculous at that point. And like I said, it's just going to cause more wear and tear on these players' bodies. We're going to see probably worse and worse ice, gameplay on the ice as the season goes on, as players get hurt more and more frequently and more, longer-term injuries. And I just don't think it's something that is necessarily a good idea, and I think it should stay at 82, even with the probable expansion that's coming up. That was surprisingly not brought up at this meeting from what I saw, even though it has been discussed by Gary Bettman and some of the owners recently, that Atlanta and Houston are most likely coming to the NHL within the next 10 years. I don't think adding 2 more teams and adding 2 more games is really a good idea. Obviously, it is just that money grab to gain that little bit of money, which, of course, is always good, growing the game, growing the monetary value of the sport to be able to reach more and more people and a bigger audience is a good thing, but I just think this is not the way to do it. Speaking of money, the cap is supposed to go up to, I think it was $92 million in the next CBA, which is great. The cap has gone up a lot since the end of the COVID, bubble era and just sort of that whole debacle. And it's really good. I really like to see that this cap is going up and up. Again, that ties into, the NHL generating more money and sort of being a bigger and bigger product that appeals to more and more people. So it's great to see the cap going up. It'll be great for a lot of teams that are sort of more up against the cap or have a lot of big stars to sign in the upcoming years. To see that after the cap was so stagnated, even before COVID, the cap was really stagnated for a really long time. It's nice to see this go up, and hopefully we can start seeing bigger and bigger contracts for better and better players, and sort of more competitive integrity with more and more money being allowed to be thrown around. Oh, throwing around things brings me to my next topic I want to sort of cover on here. So we talked about the Line A, the Tkachuk injury, and the Stützle injury. So it brings me to Arber Xhekaj, one of the perpetrators of specifically the Tkachuk injury, and he also had a part to play in the Line A injury, as he took an absolutely terrible hit, or he threw a big punch against Pare, who wasn't looking and wasn't in a defensive position to be able to sort of defend himself. But as we get more into this conversation, we'll get into that. But yeah, I thought it's just players like Xhekaj and Rempe are absolutely terrible for the game, and it makes an otherwise growing sport look like a sort of medieval gladiator match, and it's just not a good look. We look at the Xhekaj 2 incidents, assaulting Pare from behind. Pare was skating away from him, and all Xhekaj wanted to do was punch him in the head. It was very reminiscent of the Todd Bertuzzi and Steve Moore incident, if you know about that, back in, I think, 2004, if memory, or well, I guess it would be 03, 05-ish, somewhere around there. Obviously, wasn't really alive for that, so I don't quite remember. But obviously, seeing that clip played over and over again as a Canucks fan, I've seen it a lot, and seeing Xhekaj do that again in the modern NHL is just sort of a terrifying precedent that can be set. Being able to attack a player who has his back turned to you and just punching him in the head. He's lucky that it didn't turn out worse for Pare. And I think it's just a disgusting thing that the NHL just fined him. And speaking of the fine, that the Habs fans made a GoFundMe to pay his fines when Xhekaj makes $700,000 a year or whatever his contract is. It's just terrible and it's gross. It's gross behavior from the fans. It's gross behavior from the player. And it's a gross behavior from the NHL player safety department that claims to be, wanting to protect the players and wanting to protect, the reputation of the game, to let this slide and just fine him $3,000 instead of suspending him is terrible, and it's gross negligence from the NHL. And letting this continue to happen, especially with a player like Xhekaj, who should not be in the NHL. He's a terrible defenseman. All he does is fight. All he does is hit and look to injure clearly, with that disgusting hit on Chabot that received no penalty outside of the game. No suspension after literally just injury or literally assaulting. He assaulted him, to be quite frank. He assaulted a player on the ice, and with no repercussions. It's disgusting to see. It's disgusting to see the Habs fans on Twitter especially, defend this action and call it justified, And there's a bunch of Habs fans that are calling for other players to be injured. They're like, oh, I hope Xhekaj gets you. I hope he gets you, blah, blah, blah. It's disgusting. Starting a GoFundMe to pay his fine when what he clearly did was wrong. And I don't care that he was defending Laine. You let the man square up. You don't come from behind him. You don't punch him in the back of the head, which could have paralyzed him, which could have injured him more than it did. And it's just terrible. It's a terrible action. It's terrible from these fans to sort of, uplift this behavior. And it's terrible. And I don't think it has any place in the league. And I hope one day that the NHL fixes the wrongs it has created with the sort of culture that has been brewing. And with Matt Rempe too, last night or 2 nights ago, I think, with the Devils, he went in for a big hit. Luckily he missed, because God knows what would have happened if he would have collided on that one. But, he goes for a big hit, misses completely, slams himself on the board, goes for another hit, misses again, goes for another hit, just bumps into the guy. It's really embarrassing to see a guy just go around trying to hit a bunch of people in a shift with no reason. These players weren't really battling for the puck, and the battle for the puck was going on near them, obviously, but it's just disgusting to see. And, if you watch his offseason at all, he was training with, I think it was George Parros, actually, who, he was learning how to box better, how to be a better fighter, and, not working on actual hockey skills. And to let a player who literally has shown himself, it's not even like watching this guy in the ice, this is what I see from him. I mean, he shows it for himself that all he wants to do is fight, all he wants to do is hit, and he has no care for actually playing the game of hockey. And it's gross. It's a disgusting thing that the NHL even lets this guy in the league. We've seen players like him before be run out of the league. Why is he different? Why is he still in here? Especially when we know how this ends. We know he's going to cause a terrible injury. He's gonna beat up someone so bad, again, causing another terrible injury. And there's no reason for him to be in the NHL. He can't skate. He can't shoot. He can't pass. He has no hockey IQ other than there's a player, hit him. I don't care if he's facing me. I don't care if his back's towards me. I don't care if he's on the boards. I'm hitting him. I'm going to punch him in the face. I'm going to try to get under their skin. And it's just terrible. It's a terrible precedent to set for these young fans that are watching. And it's a terrible precedent to set for the league, trying to expand a league that is smaller than the other, a bunch of other sports. And, the NHL wants to continue to stake its claim as the third biggest sport, behind basketball and football. It's not going to do it by doing this. They're lucky baseball is killing themselves and that baseball is not exciting anymore. And they're lucky that they have that to be able to even continue to stay in the big three conversation here. I just don't understand how the NHL could even allow this. No repercussions for anyone. It's just gross. And to see the fans sort of support this behavior and start GoFundMes and paying their fines. And it's just terrible. It's a terrible thing to see. And it's absolutely amazing to me that the NHL allows this and won't even fix their player safety department. All right, now that I'm off my high horse, we can sort of talk about some very interesting news has been happening over the past few days. Obviously, been happening over the whole offseason, but it's come to sort of a big flaming explosion the past 2 days. The Jeremy Swayman contract situation with the Bruins. They haven't been able to get anything signed the whole offseason, and we're, 2 days away from the start of the regular season. They traded Ullmark without having Swayman signed, which I think is one of the funniest decisions that has Don Sweeney has done as GM of the Bruins. Trading your Vezina caliber goalie who has carried you the past few years. Again, obviously Swayman has his part to play in this, but they don't have him. So trading your Vezina goalie without having an insurance policy and also not being a rebuilding team. They're clearly not. They're going for the playoffs. Like I said in my season prediction in episode 1, I thought that they could make it to the Cup final if they had Swayman. But they don't. They have nothing. They have Jonas Korpisalo, and just now, today, they claimed Yuri Patra off waivers from the Canucks. He's a third goalie, whatever. He's fine, I guess. He's sort of just brought in to be an insurance marker for the Bruins, as a backup option, because I don't know if they trust Brandon Bussey to be their backup. So yeah, and then Don Sweeney lying about the contract he gave to Jeremy Swayman as if Swayman or his agent would let that slide. He said he gave him $64 million contract. Never happened, according to Swayman and his agent, who I am more inclined to believe because Swayman has been asking for around that. I think his contract want was $9.5 or $8.5 million over 8 years, which Boston, I'm pretty sure, has the cap space to cover that. So I don't know why they wouldn't just sign him to that. Him and Ullmark have been the backbone of this team for the past few seasons. And, again, not having any insurance option besides Korpisalo after the Ullmark trade, and Korpisalo hasn't been good recently. Obviously, I think he still has the potential to be a good fringe starter. But if Korpisalo is going to have to play, 50, 60 games because Swayman doesn't sign, and Boston might be in trouble. And, even if Swayman does sign, he holds out to December 1st probably, the RFA deadline. And by then, who knows what the Bruins record is. They're going to be in a hole, I would assume, with the Atlantic being especially competitive this year. They're going to be in trouble, man. And I don't know what Boston is doing here. Neither of them wanted to go to arbitration this year. After going to arbitration, I think last year they went to arbitration. So not going to arbitration this year, and just sort of leaving it up to fate, and then not even getting close to Jeremy Swayman's demands, I think is crazy. And I think if the Bruins ownership doesn't do something about Don Sweeney, they don't just go to him and be like, look, we have the money, just pay him. Because clearly they need him. This team cannot be sustained with Korpisalo and whoever ends up being their backup. So Swayman is integral to this team's success, and I think it's crazy that there's no backup plan, there's no contingency plan, and they're going to roll with Korpisalo because I personally don't see a deal getting done by Friday. And then I saw today that Jeremy Swayman says that he doesn't necessarily want to request a trade, but he will if he has to, because he's worth that much money. He is. He hasn't really gotten I think last year he got, a bigger chance to shine than he has the last few years with Ullmark being there. But, you can still see the skill before he got the more of the 1A role last year. And, and being in that 1A role, he played great, and he clearly performs better in the playoffs. Obviously, we know how the last 2 years ended for Boston, but yeah, I trust Swayman to play up to a large contract. Even having to reach maybe for $10 million. There's the whole curse of no goalie winning the cup with $10 million, and then last year Bobrovsky broke it. I don't know, things like that are stupid. Don't pay attention to that. So yeah, I think if the Bruins can't get this done, they're going to be in a hole that I don't think they can climb out with, even if they get him signed by December 1st. So we'll see what happens there if Swayman officially requests a trade, or if they can get a contract worked out to hopefully get the Bruins where they could be. So finally, speaking of, we spoke about Patera being claimed off waivers. There's some interesting players on waivers right now. I obviously don't think they're going to be claimed, but I think it's worth to discuss. There's probably some teams out there that could use these players. Waivers have been sort of interesting this year. I think there's been a few players that I think teams would have claimed, but hey, I'm not an NHL GM for a reason. These players are on waivers for a reason. So the first player I want to talk about is Spencer Martin, Carolina goalie. He was claimed off waivers, I'm pretty sure, by Carolina, off of Columbus. He had a decent season last year. He only played in 6 games, but 4-1-1 record, 896 save percentage, and 2.63 goals against average. He has 750K or 775K on 1 year left. So if a team needs a goalie, honestly, like Columbus, he could go back there and just sort of shore up that backup position. There's a few teams out there that could probably use a goalie. Anaheim, Gibson's out for I think a few weeks. So, yeah, I think he's an interesting look. He's cheap. He's an efficient backup. And I think he might be claimed. He's worth a look, at least to me. Another goalie I think is worth a look is Cal Peterson. Obviously has had a terrible career ever since signing that big contract with the LA Kings. He played only 4 games with Philly last year, 2-2-0. With an 864 save percentage, 3.9 goals against average. Again, has 1 year left on that big $5 million salary. So I don't think he gets claimed, but I think it'll be an interesting option for some GMs to look at, to sort of take a look at there, to maybe fill in a backup role or put him into another third string role. So we'll see. Not really any interesting forwards on waivers today. Matthew Phillips is sort of interesting. He's young. He has some potential, so I don't think he'll get claimed. He's only put up 5 points in the NHL. So, besides him, Scott Sabourin, obviously with the NHL's reliance on players like Jack Rempe who just fight and hit, Scott Sabourin is an interesting choice for maybe a playoff hopeful team or a contender that sort of wants to add that bottom 6 grit, as an extra option. Scott Sabourin kind of does that. Just as well as Rempe and Jack. So you never know with him. But yeah, that is it for waiver. That is it for waivers. And that brings us to the end of our show. So we have some great NHL action coming up soon, as Friday is the beginning of the regular season. I'm so excited. So next week I'll be able to talk about some regular season action and hopefully some more happy topics rather than injuries and people fighting each other and hurting each other. That has been it for me. Follow me on social media. Follow me on Instagram at Top Left Corner Pod. I post updates on there, and I'm going to start posting some sound bites, some interesting things I have takes on that maybe I don't really expand on enough here, or some things I don't get to touch on in the episode. But that has been it for me. Look out for the regular season, as I hope to bring in some special guests to talk NHL hockey with me. I've been Finn Lyons. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all next week.